All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're tackling those huge data breaches, the kind that make everyone panic about their info.
Yeah, those are the ones you really remember.
Exactly. You sent us some stuff about a specific vulnerability, and then, of course, that infamous Equifax breach.
Oh, yes.
So, we're going to use those to unpack exactly how these things go down. It's not just tech jargon,
It's about real consequences.
real world consequences, big time.
Absolutely.
This story, I think, is going to change how you see your own data security.
You're right. We think of these events as like tech issues, but the consequences are, they're so real.
Okay, so let's get to the heart of it. We've got to start with the vulnerability itself. It's got this kind of cryptic name, CVE 2017-5638.
Right.
That's our starting point. And this isn't just some random tech term. This thing got a severity score of 10 out of 10.
Wow.
That's as bad as it gets.
That's a 5-alarm fire in the cybersecurity world.
It is. So what makes this vulnerability so dangerous?
Well, it boils down to something called remote code execution. A lot of people shorten it to RCE.
Okay.
Now imagine someone breaks into your house, but instead of just, stealing your stuff, they can control everything inside. Lights, appliances, security system, everything.
Whoa.
That's basically what RCE lets hackers do.
So they can take over your whole system remotely.
Essentially, yeah.
Okay, that is seriously creepy. So how does it actually work? It all sounds like some kind of digital black magic to me.
It's clever, but it's not magic. So web applications use this thing called a content type header. You can think of it like a label on a package telling the delivery person, or in this case the server, what's inside.
Okay, I'm with you.
Now, the vulnerability in Apache Struts, and that's the software we're talking about here, allowed hackers to mess with this label. So they send a bad package, but disguised as something harmless.
Sminky.
And the system, it just follows those fake instructions, and boom, the attackers are in.
So they tricked the system.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
Tricked it into letting them in.
Clever. Which leads us to that massive Equifax breach back in 2017.
Oh, yeah.
This was a big one, right?
One for the history books.
What was it, like 147 million people affected?
147 million. Names, social security numbers, birth dates, addresses. In some cases, even driver's license and credit card numbers.
Jeez. So take us through how this all unfolded. How did this one vulnerability lead to such a huge breach?
Well, here's the thing, and this is a big thing. They actually released a patch for this critical vulnerability, CVE 2017-5638, back in March of 2017.
Wait, so there was a fix before the attack even happened?
Yeah.
Wow.
For whatever reason, Equifax's systems, they didn't flag it, they didn't apply the patch, and by May, attackers were already taking advantage of the flaw, sending those malicious packages we talked about, getting into their databases.
Unbelievable.
Equifax, they didn't even find out about the breach until July. They didn't say anything publicly until September.
That's a long time. It's like, you see your house is on fire, but you wait, what, like 3 months to call the fire department?
Yeah, kind of.
Okay, so we've got this big vulnerability, a company that missed all the warning signs. But how did these two things, actually connect to create such a massive breach?
The connection is that Equifax was running the vulnerable version of Apache Struts on their servers. So remember those sneaky packages we talked about?
Yeah.
Those bad instructions, they went straight to Equifax's systems, right past their security. And the attackers, well, they had a free pass.
So it wasn't some crazy, super sophisticated hack, just taking advantage of a known weakness.
A weakness that should have been fixed.
It's almost too simple. It's kind of hard to believe.
Yeah. And that's the really scary part. This breach showed us that even big companies with tons of resources can totally fail when it comes to basic security.
Right. And the fallout wasn't just technical. What were the real-world consequences of this huge mess?
Well, Equifax ended up paying a $700 million settlement. They failed to protect user data, so that was a huge financial hit. Yeah. But the money was just the start. They also lost a lot of trust. Their reputation was tarnished. And then this breach, it had ripple effects. Other companies started taking data security way more seriously.
Talk about a wake-up call. It makes you wonder, who were the attackers who managed to pull this off? Did they ever find out?
That's one of the most interesting parts of this whole thing. We still don't know who did it. Some experts think it might have been like a state-sponsored group, but there's no real proof.
Wow, a real cyber mystery. This is all pretty heavy stuff, It's easy to get lost in the drama and the blame game, but let's switch gears for a second. What can our listener actually learn from all of this? How can they protect themselves in this crazy digital age?
That's a great question, probably the most important question. What happened to Equifax is a lesson for everybody who uses the internet.
Okay, I'm ready to learn. So let's break it down. What's the first step to protecting our data?
Well, the most important thing is to keep your software patched. Think of patches like vaccines for your computer.
Okay.
They fix those vulnerabilities so attackers can't exploit them.
So no more hitting that remind me later button on those updates, huh?
Yeah, exactly. I know they can be annoying, but those updates could literally be the difference between keeping your data safe and, becoming the next Equifax.
All right, update early, update often.
Got it.
Yeah.
What else can we do to protect ourselves? I got to admit, I'm feeling a little vulnerable over here.
Well, another really important thing is network segmentation. Think of it like, your house, but it's divided into separate rooms. Each room has a lock.
Okay.
So even if someone breaks in, they can only get to that one room, right? Not the whole house.
So like having firewalls within our system, is this something that regular people need to worry about, or is this more of a big company thing?
It's definitely more common in big companies, but the same idea applies at home too. Think about your Wi-Fi, You can keep your important devices separate from your less critical ones. How do you do that?
Oh, there are a few ways. You could use guest networks or a VPN.
Oh,
So even if one part of your network gets compromised, the damage is contained.
okay, that makes sense. I'm definitely going to set that up when we're done here. What else? What other tips do you have for us?
The third thing is continuous monitoring. It's not enough to just set things up and then forget about them. You got to keep an eye on your systems, Look for anything suspicious.
So like a security guard who's always on duty, not just someone who checks in once a week.
Exactly. You want to be proactive, not reactive. And there are tools and services out there that can help you with this, even if you're not a tech expert.
That's good to know. So we've got to stay updated, segment our networks, and always be on the lookout. It sounds like a lot of work.
It is, but it's worth it.
Right.
It's much better to be safe than sorry. And, remember, this isn't just about protecting yourself from hackers.
Yeah.
It's about protecting your identity, your finances, your peace of mind.
That's a really good point. Data breaches have real consequences. So we've learned how a tiny code flaw can lead to a huge mess, how a big company failed to protect its users, and most importantly, what we can all do to learn from their mistakes.
It's a pretty amazing story when you think about it. And it shows that knowledge is really our best defense.
I totally agree. But before we wrap things up, I have one last question for you and one for our listener too.
Okay, I'm listening.
Think about all your online accounts. The ones with your most sensitive info, banking, healthcare, all that. Do you actually know what software they're using? Do you know if they're taking the right steps to protect your data?
It really is a good question. And, it makes me think about something else. We've been talking about big companies like Equifax, but what about all the software that, we use every single day?
Oh, I see what you mean, like operating systems, web browsers, all that stuff.
Exactly. They're like the foundation of our digital lives. But most of us never really think about them. We just assume they're secure. But the truth is, it's all built on code. And code can have vulnerabilities.
That's true. I mean, just look at how often we get those update notifications. It's like every other day.
Yeah, well, that's because developers are constantly finding and fixing vulnerabilities. It's a never-ending battle.
Okay.
And the stakes are high. I mean, if there's a vulnerability in a really popular piece of software, it could affect millions of people, even billions.
So now I'm thinking about all the different software I use. It's kind of scary. So what can we do about it? Should we just live in fear of the next vulnerability?
No, not at all. The important thing is to be aware, to understand that, no software is perfect. You always want to keep your software up to date. That's number one.
Right.
But also, do some research. See what kind of security features are built into the software you use. Look for independent audits or reviews.
So don't just blindly trust, do your homework.
Exactly. And, if you're really worried about security, you might consider using open source software.
Oh, interesting. Why is that?
Because the code is publicly available. So more people are looking at it, trying to find and fix problems.
That makes sense. So it's kind of like being a smart shopper, but not just for products, but for the software that runs everything.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah.
We need to be more picky about the software we use. Just like we are with the food we eat, the clothes we wear.
Well said. This has been a really fascinating deep dive. We've covered a lot of ground, from the details of a specific vulnerability to how software security impacts our everyday lives.
And we've learned that, the threats are out there, but knowledge, awareness, those are our best defenses.
Couldn't agree more. Thanks for guiding us through all this.
My pleasure.
And to our listener, we hope this deep dive has left you feeling informed and empowered. maybe a little bit more curious about the software that makes your digital world go round.
Keep asking questions.
Keep those questions coming. And until next time, stay safe out there. That's a wrap for today's deep dive.